Hey everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this panoramic in a couple easy steps. Alright, so for the first step for our panoramic, we got to bring in the photos. So I'm going to bring them over here, drag and drop, and we'll get them done. So I'm going to drop them into Lightroom. And we're coming up perfect. I'm going to hit add because I just want to use them as a reference. Build my smart previews, hit import. Looking good. Lightroom's bringing them in. Sounds good. I'm going to hit Command A because I want to select them all. I'm going to create a collection called Pano. Include my selected photos, hit create, and now I have a collection called Pano. So in Lightroom there's a pretty awesome function. Once your photos are selected, you can actually go to Develop module and wait for that to load. If you right click, you got a blurry image. Well, the important thing is you always want to check your images to make sure they're good. Now obviously these are fully unprocessed, on a bit of an angle, based off the way I captured them. And this is the one I don't want. So I'm going to delete. Perfect. Alright, so I'm going to hit Command A to select them all. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go Photo Merge to Panorama. And this is all inside of Lightroom. So there will be sections of this time where I speed it up and essentially come back. But essentially Lightroom does it all for you. Alright, so Lightroom has merged them. It's taken about maybe a minute and a half of time, not very long. And you see this is my panoramic. Now this is obviously pre-edited, and this shows you what it would look like if I leave it as is. Now to get rid of this white random border, because it has stitched these photos together, I'm going to hit Auto Crop, and it does a pretty good job. I'm also going to adjust the boundary warp to see if I can fix that. If you notice, I want you guys to watch the outside of the photo here. Okay, so if I bring this back to 0, there's a huge distortion as if the Earth is bending, which it actually is not. So if you increase the boundary warp, it will actually warp those sides to be a little bit straighter and a little bit better. I think that's looking pretty good. Yeah, alright, so I'm going to hit merge. And panoramic on the top left-hand side will work through. I'm going to hit pause and start back again when it's created. Alright, so Lightroom has successfully created my photo. What it's done is it's taken my 9 images that have been overlaid and overlapped, stitched them together, and given me this. This is my stitched together photo. Now obviously it's not perfect. You can notice here that it's unedited, maybe some warped lines, but in general it did a pretty darn good job of fixing it. I'm actually really happy with that. That looks really good. Alright, perfect. So that's not too bad. So the next step is to actually start to edit and manipulate this photo. Now, if you notice here across my horizon line, it's not really straight. So I'm going to go to my actual crop tool, my angle tool. I'm going to say this is my angle. And it should correct it to that. Hit done. And there we go. That's looking way better. Now, this is not something of interest to me. And neither is this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just crop this in. I'm going to hit my cropped tool. I'm going to pull this in from the right, pull it in from the left, go up a little bit higher. I want a little more information there. I don't want to have this in the bottom right. I'm going to hit done. All right, I like that. That's looking pretty darn good. All right, so the first step is we want to edit this one. So we're not going to edit these other guys. So we're going to leave them here. But essentially, I do want to edit this specific image. So the first step in any image you got to think of is, well, how's the brightness? Well, the brightness is not too bad in this picture. But I'm just going to play with auto and see what auto exposure does. And wow, that was horrible. This is way brighter than it was in reality. So I'm going to hit reset. Actually, not hit reset. I'm going to Command Z. If I hit reset, it resets the whole photo. I'm going to go Command Z. Brings me back one step. So I'm going to hit Command Z once. It brings me back, and we're good to go. Now, I want to make one specific note here, and we'll be making a ton of different adjustments to this photo, working through it, and we're going to create a stunning photo in the end. But I want to show you something called the history. Now, the history actually is every single adjustment you do. Meaning, if you're wondering, hey, I did this step, I wonder, it screwed up 5 steps after this, you can actually look at your history and it will give you an exact line of what you've done, every adjustment you've done from your import all the way to the final thing. So just a little extra tip, the history tracks everything you do. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to actually start playing with my white balance because it was not exactly that blue. So I'm going to add a little bit of magenta. There we go. Now, I'm just going to play through, and I want to increase these lights a little bit, right? So I'm going to increase my whites. Perfect. Increase my clarity. There we go. That's coming along. It's looking way better already. So if I hit my backslash key, this is what it was, and this is what I've done so far. And this is very simple, very minimal edits. But essentially, like, this is before, raw, unedited. This is a few, like, 2 or 3 edits on their own. Now, if you notice here, this is a highlight. Now, I want to reduce that down because that is a pretty bam highlight. So I'm going to pull that back and see what happens. There we go. I see a little bit more of that detail. I don't want to lose that that was actually the Cirque du Soleil in Montreal. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. Now, if you notice here, the image has, this is the actual original color, and over here there's a lot of orange. Now, if you see the orange here, right? The orange is not actually true black. The reason why that was because there was a big light to my left. There was a border right here across the bottom of the image, and there was a big tungsten light that was adding light spilling into this picture. So that is what is affecting this image itself. And I want this blue to sort of continue along. So what you can do is this. In Lightroom, you think if you have too much orange, you got to add blue. Meaning it doesn't, Lightroom works differently than Photoshop. Now, Photoshop is a true photo manipulation program, whereas Lightroom is not the same way. Lightroom is more of an enhancement program, and you got to sort of outthink the way Lightroom works. So if I have something that's too orange, I got to think in the spectrum of white balance, meaning if I want to add a little more blue, it will compensate what's going on. So I want to double click my brush tool here, double click the word effect, it resets it. I'm going to add a bit of a blue, and then I'm just going to start to paint and see what happens. There you go. That's actually doing a pretty darn good job because I don't want to lose the information I've got, but I do want to make sure that what is coming in, there's no other colors that are hurting my photo. I want to make sure that blue makes sense. There we go. That looks really good. And all we're doing, so if I turn this off, I want you to look at all of this color here. The blues are right along here. It's going to actually look more consistent. Now you might be thinking, why the heck do I want my edits to look consistent? Well, when you're editing a photo, in order to make it believable, meaning believable so people like it, you got to make sure that your edit is consistent. Now obviously this is a little bit too blue when I have it turned on, so I'm going to reduce that down, but essentially here it drops down that orange and makes it a better color where it's more consistent with the photo. Now what I want to do is, if I hold down my option key, so on the brush tool, if I hold down my option key, I get a minus symbol. That minus symbol means that I'm going to remove where I painted. So I'm just going to remove the blue from there. And I'm actually going to drop my flow down a little bit. The flow is the amount that actually comes out. So think of it like a tap. If you turn your tap on all the way, that's like having flow of 100. Right? If you turn your tap on just a little bit, it's like having a flow of 3 or 4, 20, let's say. So if your flow is lower, you're going to have less being applied to the picture at once, which is what I want to have. So that looks pretty good so far. I'm going to hit done, and I'm really happy with what I'm seeing. Now, what I do want to do though is I want to add in a little, just for me jumping ahead here, I want to add a bit of sharpening. I want to increase my sharpening, play with my radius a little bit just to see. I want radius right about here, keep my detail up a little bit, increase my noise reduction because there was a little bit of grain. Now, I shot it at 50 ISO, which means there's not a ton of noise reduction, but there's always some things that can affect your photo. So I'm going to drop it down a little bit. So if I turn this off and on, you will notice that there should be an adjustment. It's very minor, but it does affect and help the photo. So I'll hit my backslash key to see the before and after. Here's the before, unedited. And here's the after, and that's just a couple simple edits done very, very easily. Let's zoom in and wait for it to populate here. It's looking pretty good. I'm liking everything that's going on. Now, if you're wondering how far and how I'm able to control my zooming in, if you look here on the top left-hand side, I can hit the word fit, Now if I zoom in, it actually zooms into a 1-to-1 ratio, which is 1-to-1. If I click fit, it zooms back out. If I want to fill it, then it fills the screen, it fills the area, and I can look around that way. Or if I want to go to, let's say, 1-to-1, 2-to-1, all the way down to 11-to-1, which is a really small section, and you start to get really pixelated. If you're wondering how actually far in that is, if you look on the left-hand side here, there's a little square. Well, that's exactly how far zoomed in I am. So if I want to go back out here, you're never going to logically go that far, but 2-to-1 makes pretty good sense, or even 1-to-1. And yeah, that makes sense. So if I hit fit, it fills a little better. Fills it definitely better. So that's looking pretty good. Now, the question is, do I want to be even more zoomed in? Because this is a panoramic, obviously, right? So if you look here at the city skyline, the city lights, yes, they are a bit orange, and that's just the nature of having different kinds of light, because light gives off color. Also, when you're playing with a panoramic, depending on how your images were captured, there'll be different distortions happening to them. And holistically, I have a little bit of distortion happening in these photos. And I'm only knowing that based off of the buildings. The buildings look slightly off. So the question is, do I want to fix it? Do I want to keep it? I may play with it a little bit, but I'm thinking right now it's looking pretty darn good. So now we've done our sharpening, we've done our clarity, we've done our noise reduction. Here's the before and after, just sort of seeing as we're moving along. I'm really happy with what I'm seeing. It's looking really good. I'm actually going to pull back my... Actually, I'm not going to pull back. I'm going to do something different. So in Lightroom, there's always more than one way to do the same thing. And what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to keep my HSL panel up. The HSL is a hue, saturation, and luminance panel. I want to increase the luminance of orange. And what I mean by that is the luminance is the brightness of orange. Because I want these to be not be orange, but I want them to be brighter. Almost like white dots, give or take. So I'm going to increase the luminance and see what happens. So if I go back to 0, you notice here, just watch, all these oranges will drop down, the yellows and oranges. If I go plus, they go almost more white. And that's what I want. I don't want this to be orange, I want this to be more of a white. And that makes sense. Now I can also go to the saturation and pull back the blue, pull back the orange. And what's going to happen is it's going to remove any of the saturation in the specific orange. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to reset that. I'm going to leave that there because I don't want to mess with that too much. I like that. Now, what I'm going to do is... I like that. All right, so I'm going to actually make these stand out a bit more. And how I'm going to do that is instead of... So if you look back here, if I play with my clarity, this is at 68 right now. If I do the clarity, it does what you call a global adjustment. It adjusts it everywhere, right? So this adjusts clarity, meaning makes it softer, makes it more crisp and more vibrant. It adjusts it everywhere across the whole image. But what if I want to do it just in this specific spot? Well, that's when you got to use a brush. Now I'm going to use a new brush, hit effect. I'm going to increase my clarity, increase my highlights, pull back, increase my whites just a little bit, pull my shadows in. And I haven't made these adjustments yet, but I'm just playing with it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in and just start to paint and see what happens. I'm going to start painting. Oh, I'm going to increase my flow because I want it to happen a little quicker than later. And all I'm doing is painting these specific settings onto this area. And the reason why you want to use a paintbrush is you can be way more specific. Because sometimes when you make adjustments to a photo, you need to do more specific adjustments to make sure it looks and acts the way you want. And if you're wondering, hey, I don't believe you're making any adjustments right now, give me a second, let me paint it, and you'll see what I am talking about. So if I turn this off and on, you'll see there is a difference. See, this is before, and this is after. There is definitely a difference in what we're doing. So I'm going to go and paint all of the buildings with this specific brush. And all it's doing is increasing those highlights, adding a bit more clarity, adding a bit more brightness in certain areas to our highlights, because I want those highlights to pop. I don't want them to be bland. Bland is bad. And those are looking really yellow. That's okay in some areas, but I don't want my lights to look really yellow. And the reason why they look yellow is because of the actual light inside of the office. The light inside of the office is most likely a tungsten light, which means that when your camera is balanced to a certain thing, so your white balance is set a certain way, your colors will look different based off of the light they have. So if we have all of these lights here are most likely tungsten, or we've got different kinds of fluorescent lights that are inside of these buildings and they're affecting everything. So right now my camera is balanced to what the sun is. That's not sun balance, but essentially the white balance is affected by that. And obviously we have different kinds of lights happening here. I'm liking this. So if you're wondering what I actually did, so if I actually zoom out here, I can go back to my brush and notice here that we've got a dot here and we've got a dot here. So if I, for example, go to this dot, see how everything's highlighted when I go over it? So if I press the circle key, see anything in red? That means that that is everywhere that I painted. So everywhere I told you I painted, I did paint. And what it's doing is it's affecting those specific adjustments to that area. And I'm going to do some more over here. So I'm going to zoom in again and work through this, adding more contrast, clarity, color, making those lights pop. Because for me, this photo really shines when I have a lot of good contrast and good adjustments. I like that. Now I'm not going to do a lot here because watch, if I do this, this is going to get even brighter, and it's already super bright. Don't want to do that. So if you're ever stuck, you hit Command Z and you're good to go to fix it that way. I like that. So I'm going to hit done, zoom back out again. I'm going to pick another brush, hit new, double click the word effect. I'm going to increase my, where is my vibrance? Not my saturation, we'll do that. Just a little bit of saturation, and then start painting, and it's going to increase our colors. Now I'm also, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to increase my saturation just a little bit. On the same brush, I'm going to reduce my sharpness. I'm going to soften down those areas. That's looking pretty good. I'm actually really happy with that. So if I zoom in, I can be able to see the different areas. Looking pretty good. Zoom out. If I want to hit fit, this is the whole image. If I want to see the before, this is my before. This is my after, and it's made up of these different images. So here. Now these images are on an angle. Now what happens is it's because my camera was on the tripod and it wasn't completely flat. So if you notice here, the images on the very bottom, they're more obviously, there's the light spilling in. Well, these are the 9 images I put into a panoramic in Lightroom. So remember, once you have your images selected, for example, you'd hit Command A, select all your images, you would right click, you go up to Photo Merge and hit Panorama, and you're good to go. Now HDR is a high dynamic range photo. Now Panoramic is different than HDR because HDR will take 3 different exposures and you'll layer them together, whereas a Panoramic, you take your overlaid images and you'll stitch them together. And this is no Photoshop, this is all Lightroom. Lightroom is freaking amazing. So happy with Lightroom. And yeah, I'm actually really, really, really happy with that. Looks really good. Do you know, I'm going to keep that as is. Oh, do I have any things in the sky? Let's find out. Okay, there's a couple things to fix. We're going to go back here. I like that. All right, so what we're going to do is... Now, there's a really cool feature that you guys need to know about. So, if you notice here, if you click the clone tool, there are some imperfections in my photo, and you're wondering, wait a second, how do you see them? Well, there actually are. So if I, for example, click my clone tool, and I want to know where the spots are. So if I go all the way down here, and I click Visualize Spots, what's going to happen is Lightroom is going to put a bit of a filter on, and it's going to show you where these spots are. So if you turn this off, what happens is any of these extreme dots represent a spot, and I'm going to fix them. So I'm going to reduce that down. I'm going to click that. It's just going to clone and remove, and it should be perfect. You don't have to worry about it. I'm liking that. I like that. I'm going to go back to Visualize Spots, turn it off, and we're looking good. I'm going to hit done, and that's looking like a pretty darn good photo. So that's the image we created. It was super simple, didn't take a long time. working through just a simple process on different exposures, highlights, contrasts. Hopefully you learned a couple new things, saw how to make a panoramic, and if you have questions, make sure you put them in the comments below, and you also ask. Now, if you have also any photos that you want me to edit of your own, they don't have to be professional photos, but if you want photos to be edited, I can work through them, give you all the credit. I would love to have that. Make sure you send me an email to info@behindthecurtain.ca and send me an email, and I will gladly look into what I can do to help you have that become a reality. All right, so hopefully you have a great day and learn a couple new things, and stay tuned for the next episode.